Okay, cool. Yeah, these are basically the documents you're talking about, man. You weren't joking when you sent me that DM. Like, I think you're gonna like this, what I just published. I was like, yes, you are correct. This is absolutely fascinating what it came with. Why don't you just kind of break down the story you broke here
Sure.
a little bit?
Yeah, there was the root of it goes to the claims and kind of that he said story between Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and David Grusch. And essentially what spawned this request was essentially David Grusch saying, "Hey, I'm willing to talk to AARO, but they haven't gotten back to me or returned my phone call." I'm paraphrasing there, but essentially that was his stance at the time that I had filed this particular FOIA. That has changed a little bit because I want to be fair that he's since said that AARO didn't give him the proper evidence that they were cleared to hear everything. And we can talk about that in a couple minutes. So I want to make note of that up front, that he has kind of amended that a little bit. But that was the claim from David Grusch. That from Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was essentially he reached out to him through connections and directly, and he never responded / wouldn't come in. So I thought, okay, well, look, if they're not in a SCIF, it's likely not classified information because David Grusch was not part of the government anymore around this time. And if they're communicating, it was likely through insecure channels. And with that being said, to someone like me, it makes it a lot easier to access through FOIA. It's a lot harder to hide information that's unclassified. Personal identifying information, a little bit different. But regardless, I can cross that bridge, and I'll deal with those types of redactions to kind of show you what I mean with what you had on the screen there. My address, if you were to request that letter, would be redacted just for privacy reasons. So I deal with those types of redactions, not a big deal. But I was looking for just the meat of these communications. Well, what I got was a little bit more than what I thought. It showed a memorandum for the record that was written in January of 2024. It was at the top of the release package there. There it is right there.
Here, right.
And what it did was it essentially outlined all of the attempts to contact David Grusch. That it essentially put this memorandum for the record on the record within the DOD that said, hey, on this date, we did this. On this date, we did this. And to further support this memo, they had attachments to it, which included communications between Christopher Mellon and Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and talking essentially like Christopher Mellon was that middleman, and Dr. Kirkpatrick is saying, and again, this is paraphrasing, I invite you all to read the text messages, they're all there, but essentially saying, look, you should come in. We're willing to talk to him. The clearance is there, and so on. And then Mr. Mellon was essentially saying and questioning that clearance, but that he would pass it on. So it's a very interesting exchange that actually gets a little bit, shall we say, testy between the two.
Yeah, it's interesting. I found it interesting that they were. I found it interesting that they were signal messages, like encrypted. Like, how did that? I guess that's all. If you're communicating on behalf with the government or something like that, becomes that communication then becomes available, public information, or what?
That is correct. So it was like
encrypted.
Yeah, because I was accused online the morning that I had published it by someone, and I don't even try and get into the weeds with some of these people, but they were appalled that I would publish these particular communications, that the privacy reasons should take over and so on. Now, number one, this is considered public record. Now, when you communicate with a government official through government email addresses and so on, you become essentially part of that public record. And someone like Mr. Mellon would likely know that already, simply because of his work in government, that those communications become public record and FOIA-able. That includes emails, text messages, all of that type of communication back and forth, even though it's with a private citizen, all becomes public record. So that's why I've been able to get, let's say, Bigelow Aerospace or Bass emails through FOIA when a lot of people said you can't do that. They were communicating with the FAA years ago about UFOs. So yeah, I think that there's a misconception there on how or why these would come out. It's not malicious
Yeah,
on the side of the government. It's well known. If you communicate
sure.
with the government, then it becomes part of public record. Now, the exemptions will apply on personally identifying information. So Mr.
Sure.
Mellon's phone number that they were texting, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff is redacted. But regardless, the communications themselves are not. So I just wanted to address that point real quick.
No, for sure.
And you can see the back and forth. And what was to back to your point about the signal, I was a little surprised to see that method of communication. What that it stems from, I don't know. It may have been Dr. Kirkpatrick's preference. It may have been Mr. Mellon's preference. This release doesn't really say that at all. So I'm not really sure there, at least as of the recording of this with you. So I don't know why they used Signal. There's other text messages that were there that obviously were not. That was with a individual that is not revealed. That was considered private information. So that was likely maybe someone who's currently active in the government or somebody not publicly known. So the Privacy Act, which kind of goes hand in hand with the Freedom of Information Act, it's sometimes hard to figure out then who will they redact when it comes to a name versus who they won't. So it kind of varies from agency to agency. But you will see those text messages as well. So that was another associate of Grusch that AARO was reaching out to saying, hey, can you get him to come in? So it was an interesting...
I saw that. I want to go over all of those messages too. Like, let's, we'll go over, let's start with this one real quick. Let's start with like the timeline of, because that's kind of the big story, right? That happened last year was that here, before I bring this up, but that Grusch was kind of going back and forth with Kirkpatrick in, the media, if you will, I guess, through statements and stuff like, hey, you haven't reached out to me. Kirkpatrick saying, no, I have. We've tried to get you into AARO. Grusch saying, no, you haven't. I don't have any communication. A lot of, all this. I made several videos about it. So I definitely know the backstory about it. And then seeing this, it kind of changes the story, to be honest with you. And with, again, actual evidence of a lot of these email communications that happened. So let's you did a great job of laying out this timeline on your website. Again, I'll put links in the description, y'all, for everyone to go check out John's website and all of the stuff that we're showing so you guys can look at it. But essentially, can you see that, John, well enough to read it?
On my screen, it's
hang on. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, and I can pull it up on my side too, but I think I could.
I figured I'd have you read these. We'll go, but each one here and kind of go through the timeline.
Yeah. I will read from my website, so forgive my eyeline here, but I'm happy to read that to you. You want the whole timeline that the condensed version that I put in the article?
That you did, exactly. Yeah,
sure.
Great.
Sure. June 8th through the 13th, 2023. Initial contact was made with known associates of Grusch, urging them to have him speak with AARO. These efforts were clarified during dialogues between AARO's director and individuals close to Grusch. June 26, 2023, AARO staff reached out directly for Grusch's contact details and extended an interview invitation, which Grusch declined. June 28th, after Grusch's congressional testimony, AARO sought any verifiable information he might have shared with Congress. July 27, 2023, further attempts to arrange an interview through another associate of Grusch who was meeting him the following day. October 6, 2023, a secure call was made to encourage Grusch to participate in a formal interview. November 10th, 2023, Grusch agreed to be interviewed on November 14th after congressional staff urged his cooperation. November 14th, Grusch failed to appear at the scheduled interview, expressing doubts about AARO's authorization to handle classified information. November 19th, AARO contacted Grusch again, reiterating their authorization and inviting him to discuss his claims, which he declined. January 8th of this year, 2024, AARO provided additional documentation to address Grusch's concerns about confidentiality and classification handling, maintaining a standing invitation for an interview. That was where these documents have left off.
Yeah, and you can see right here, again, all of that is in the document on John's website, so please go check that out. You can see everything he's referencing in that sort of timeline that he made. And quickly, you kind of pointed this out right here. This is the person that was meeting Grusch on November 14th, emailing Grusch at 10:34 a.m. saying, "I've been waiting in the lobby over 30 minutes. Are you showing up?" Because they had a 10 a.m. appointment to meet. And from what I can gather from quickly going through the documents before our interview, John, the big crux of this sort of dilemma between AARO and Grusch was really Grusch's questions about, is AARO allowed to accept the information that I want to tell them? Are they legally allowed to? And that was the back and forth. Grusch asking questions, them answering, saying, no, we are legally allowed. Here's proof. Here's this, here's that. And Grusch, either for whatever reason, that's not enough for him, his standard, I don't know, whatever. It seemed like some miscommunication and misunderstanding. And to be fair to Grusch did apologize for not showing up to that meeting. I do want to make sure that I read that as well. He did say, thank you, or I apologize for the confusion this morning about my whereabouts. I should have been more clear in my email on Monday. Because again, from what I could tell, that's what was holding up. He felt like, yes, I agreed to come in at 10 a.m. on this date, but I asked some questions, and in his mind, those questions didn't get answered. So therefore, that's why he didn't show up to that meeting and I guess didn't know it was confirmed, or however. What do you think? Am I steel manning that right? Am I
I think you're absolutely right. I made sure that his apology was in the article, and I made reference to that. I believe just from a professional courtesy standpoint, I'm glad that he did that. Little 100%. Surprised though that it went so far as to it being scheduled. Something like this just isn't, a lunch date between buddies, but rather something pretty important. And it went right down to the wire, where these guys are sitting in the lobby for 30 minutes. So I'm kind of surprised at that. And I will also stress, in the interest of fairness to David Grusch, that this really comes down to the exact timeline of how everything unfolded. That what, someone says on a Monday could absolutely be a different answer if something else happens that next Tuesday. You know what I mean? So I don't want to just immediately jump on him and say, aha, he's lying. It's much more complicated than that. But I will say, just in the initial, because this is so new as we're recording this, just kind of in the initial unfolding of this with the general public. And now, you go to David Grusch's associates like Jeremy Corbell, who does interviews and makes these pretty big accusations against Kirkpatrick lying, and that there was no invitation and this and that. Those definitely, from what I've seen, have come after these invitations were sent, or these attempts to contact Grusch were sent. So I think we have to really be fair to the timeline, and in the same respect, be fair to the facts here on when this all unfolded. But I will say, what we've been told by David Grusch and close associates to him through these various YouTube channels and podcasts that they do, doesn't look like it's 100% accurate. And I think, with that being said, and now we have the documents, I will reiterate, I don't think the FOIA is the end all be all, and this is gospel, but I will say this is a very important pile of evidence now. So if somebody wants to counter that, if somebody wants to come and dispute any of this, do it. I will be the first to publish an updated article and put those statements out there. I didn't attempt to contact David Grusch again, because I've done so numerous times in the past through his attorney, known associates, and so on. And each and every one was ignored. So I just don't find it, beneficial to anybody anymore to continue to try and do it. If he wants to address these things, I really hope that he does. If his associates that have made major claims about how all this have unfolded, I hope they do. I hope mainstream media that reports on David Grusch's story, I hope they look at this and go, okay, let's ask some more questions. Because look, if AARO's lying and they're fabricating, and this is all a big game of charades, let's hear it. Those are things that we need to hear. And I hope people with more of a reach than me will look at this and go, okay, let's build off of it. That's why I write these articles. Because again, I make them open-ended. I think there are ways to keep moving this forward, but the players involved have to play ball. And a lot of times they don't want to. They stay in a very close, tight niche bubble, and only associate with those that don't ask these types of questions. And I don't want to name names, but there are journalists out there that cover this. Why aren't they filing FOIAs that I've seen? Why aren't they coming out with documents? It's too early to tell if they'll cover this. So I'm not going to make, any accusations. This is so fresh. I don't expect anybody to have a story out on this yet. But if they don't, you have to ask why. Why aren't they pushing stuff like this? Even if they did come to the determination that AARO is lying through their teeth, that's fine. But I think that these pieces of evidence need to be addressed.